Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. I was at Murphy's bar when everything started falling apart. It was Tuesday night, our weekly veterans meetup. Me, Frank, and the rest of the old guard sharing stories over lukewarm beer. My prosthetic leg was propped against the bar stool, and Jinx, my gray tabby, was probably asleep on my favorite armchair back home. The TV above the counter had been showing a basketball game, but around 8 p.m. they cut to breaking news. Reports of violent incidents downtown, hospitals overwhelmed, emergency services stretched thin. We'd seen our share of civil unrest before, but something about this felt different. "Looks like trouble brewing," Frank muttered, his weathered face illuminated by the harsh glow of the television. The others nodded, that familiar tension creeping into their shoulders, the kind you never really forget after combat. I sipped my beer, watching as more reports flooded in. The attacks seemed random, spread across different neighborhoods. The footage showed people running, screaming. The camera work was shaky, but I caught glimpses of figures pursuing them with an eerily persistent gait. My phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Patterson next door, asking if I'd heard about what was happening downtown. She knew I lived alone since Marie passed, and even with Jinx for company, she always kept an eye out for me. The bar's usual warmth suddenly felt stifling. Maybe it was decades of combat instinct, or just plain survival sense, but something in my gut said this wasn't a normal crisis. I finished my drink and reached for my prosthetic. "Heading out early, Jack?" Murphy asked from behind the bar, his voice carrying that slight edge of concern. "Got some things to take care of," I replied, securing my leg. The familiar process of click, adjust, stand had become second nature over the years. "You might want to consider closing up early tonight." The others watched me, their expressions a mix of understanding and uncertainty. We'd all been through enough to recognize when something wasn't right. Outside, the night air carried an unusual stillness. The streetlights cast long shadows across empty sidewalks, and somewhere in the distance sirens wailed. My truck was parked around the corner, and each step echoed against brick walls. I reached the driver's side door just as a woman came running down the street, her heels clicking frantically against the pavement. Behind her, a figure emerged from the shadows, moving with disturbing determination. Something was wrong with its movements. Not drunk, not drugged, but fundamentally wrong. The woman spotted me and changed direction, heading straight for my truck. "Please," she gasped. "Please help." Years of training kicked in. I opened the passenger door, motioning for her to get in. As she scrambled inside, I got a better look at her pursuer. Their skin had a sickly pallor, clothes torn and stained, but it was their eyes that sent a chill through me, vacant yet somehow focused, like a predator's. I got in and started the engine, the familiar rumble doing little to calm my nerves. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of more figures emerging from side streets, all moving with that same unsettling purpose. "Thank you," the woman breathed, her hands trembling. "I'm Rita. I was leaving work when that person just attacked. They weren't normal." "Jack," I responded, keeping my eyes on the road. "Where do you live?" She gave me an address on the other side of town, but as we turned onto Madison Avenue, we saw the road was blocked. Cars were abandoned at odd angles, some with doors still open. In the distance, smoke rose against the night sky. "Something's very wrong," I said, more to myself than Rita. "We need to get somewhere safe, regroup, figure out what's happening." My house wasn't far, a modest single story with a basement I'd spent years modifying. Call it paranoia or preparation. But after Vietnam, I'd learned the value of having a secure fallback position. "I live about 10 minutes from here," I told her. "Got supplies, radio equipment, secured doors and windows. We can hole up there until we know more." Rita nodded, her eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding around us. More people were running now, while others moved with that distinctive predatory gait. As we passed the neighborhood park, we saw a group of them surrounding something, or someone. I pressed the accelerator, knowing we couldn't help. The roads grew quieter as we approached my street, but that only made the distant screams more noticeable. I pulled into my driveway, hitting the garage door opener with practiced efficiency. The security lights clicked on, revealing no immediate threats. "Inside quickly," I instructed, grabbing my go-bag from behind the seat, another habit that had stuck with me through the years. Rita followed close behind as I unlocked the door leading into the house. Jinx was waiting, his yellow eyes reflecting the garage lights. He meowed once, then darted into the kitchen. Smart cat. He always seemed to know when something was wrong. "Make yourself comfortable," I told Rita, securing the door behind us. "I need to check the house, then we can figure out our next move." As I moved through familiar rooms, checking windows and doors, my mind raced through possibilities. Whatever was happening out there wasn't random violence or civil unrest. This was something else entirely, something that made my combat instincts scream danger. I'd survived one war on foreign soil. Now it looked like another kind of war was starting right here at home. After securing the house, I turned on my emergency radio, hoping to get clearer information than the chaotic news reports. Rita sat on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while Jinx perched on the windowsill, his tail twitching as he watched the street. The radio crackled with scattered reports, multiple attacks across the city. Hospitals overwhelmed, emergency services failing. But it was the description of the attackers that made my blood run cold. People acting like rabid animals, biting and tearing at flesh, seemingly immune to pain or reason. "They're saying not to approach anyone showing signs of aggressive behavior," the radio announcer's voice wavered. "Avoid all physical contact with infected individuals. I repeat, avoid all..." The transmission cut to static. My thoughts turned to Murphy's bar. Frank and the others. Had they listened when I suggested closing early? The image of that thing chasing Rita flashed through my mind, multiplied by the dozens of shadows we'd seen moving through the streets. "I need to call the bar," I muttered, pulling out my phone. The signal was weak, but it rang. Each unanswered ring increased my anxiety until Murphy's gruff voice finally came through. "Jack, things are getting bad out here," he said, his voice tight with tension. "Frank and Bill left right after you. Tom and I are barricading the doors, but these people, they keep coming. They're not stopping, Jack. Bullets don't seem to..." The line went dead. "Damn it," I growled, trying to redial. No signal. The power flickered ominously, and Jinx let out a low growl. Through the window, I could see more figures stumbling down the street, their movements growing more aggressive with each passing minute. Rita moved to the window, keeping behind the curtain. "They're not human anymore, are they?" she whispered. "I saw one of them, before, when it was chasing me. Karen from accounting. She had a bite on her neck and her eyes. There was nothing there." I nodded grimly. "Whatever this is, it's spreading through bites, turning people into..." I hesitated to use the word, but there was no other way to describe it. "Into zombies." The power went out completely, plunging us into darkness. I moved quickly, retrieving battery-powered lanterns from my emergency supplies. Years of preparation suddenly didn't feel like paranoia anymore. "We need to get to the basement," I said, gathering essential supplies. "It's more secure, and I've got enough stored to..." A crash from the kitchen cut me off. Jinx bolted from his perch, hissing. Through the doorway, I saw one of them had broken through the window, a man in a torn business suit, his face smeared with blood. He moved with that terrible singular focus I'd seen earlier, drawn by our movement and voices. I grabbed my hunting rifle from the cabinet, but in the dim light and close quarters I knew firing would be risky. The sound would only attract more. Instead, I picked up the baseball bat I kept near the door. "Basement! Now!" I ordered Rita, pointing to the door. She ran for it as the infected lunged forward. My prosthetic leg didn't slow me as much as you'd think. Necessity has a way of pushing you past limitations. I swung the bat, connecting with its skull. The impact sent shockwaves up my arms, but the creature barely stumbled. It turned those empty eyes toward me, jaw snapping with inhuman strength. I struck again, harder. and this time it went down. More shadows moved past the broken window. We were out of time. I made it to the basement door just as the first one started climbing through. Rita had already descended the stairs, and I followed, locking the reinforced door behind us. The basement was one of the first things I'd modified after buying the house. Concrete walls, steel door, separate ventilation system. Now I was grateful for every upgrade I'd made. As we caught our breath in the dim lantern light, my mind raced. Murphy and Tom were still at the bar, possibly trapped. Frank and Bill might have made it home, but with phones down, there was no way to know. The bitter truth was that attempting a rescue now would be impossible with the streets overrun. "Your friends," Rita said softly, reading my expression. "The ones from the bar. Could we help them?" I checked my supplies, ammunition, food, water, medical supplies, everything needed for a long siege, but nothing that could help me save anyone out there. The sounds of multiple infected throwing themselves against the house above made the decision for me. "They're veterans," I said finally, trying to convince myself as much as her. "They know how to handle themselves. Right now, we need to focus on surviving the night." Jinx appeared at the top of the stairs, meowing urgently. I opened the door just enough to let him dart down before securing it again. He immediately found his usual spot on top of my storage containers, watching the ceiling as heavy footsteps moved across the floor above. I powered up my emergency radio again, hoping for more information. The regular stations were offline, but I picked up scattered transmissions from emergency services and military channels. Benefits of keeping my old equipment maintained. Multiple outbreaks across all major cities. Bite victims turning within minutes. Aim for the head. Repeat, aim for the head. Military containment failing. Stay in your homes. Rita sat on a camp chair, absently petting Jinx, who had moved to comfort her. What do we do now? I checked my watch, barely 4 hours since I'd left Murphy's bar. In that time, the world had started to end. We wait, we listen, and we prepare. Because whatever this is, it's only the beginning. A loud crash upstairs made us both jump. The infected were inside the house now, and from the sounds of it, there were more arriving. I did a mental inventory of my supplies, trying to calculate how long we could stay down here if needed. My prosthetic leg ached from the strain of recent activity. I sat heavily on a storage crate, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Somewhere out there, my friends were fighting their own battles for survival. All I could do was hope they'd found shelter, found a way to survive like we had. The night stretched ahead of us, filled with the sounds of the infected above and the occasional distant scream. Each cry made me think of Murphy's bar, of Frank, and the others. I'd left one war behind decades ago, only to find myself in the middle of another. But this time, the enemy wasn't across the jungle. It was right upstairs, wearing the faces of our neighbors and friends. The basement had grown colder as the night wore on. Rita dozed fitfully on the camp bed while Jinx kept watch from his perch, his eyes fixed on the ceiling where heavy footsteps still echoed above. I checked my watch, 11:45 p.m. The world had fallen apart in less than 4 hours. My emergency radio crackled periodically with fragments of broadcasts, each more desperate than the last. The military was setting up quarantine zones, but most announcements cut off mid-sentence. The power grid was failing in sections across the city, and the darkness seemed to be spreading like a stain across the urban landscape. Through the static, a familiar voice cut through on the emergency frequency I'd set up years ago for our veterans group. "Jack, you reading this? It's Frank." I adjusted the dial quickly, heart racing. "Frank, are you safe? Where are you?" "Made it home. Betty and I are locked down tight. Got some news about Murphy's too. They're holding up okay for now. Murphy got that steel door down just in time, and they've got enough supplies behind the bar to last a while." Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived as Frank continued. "Haven't heard from Bill, though. He said he was heading home, but..." Frank's voice trailed off. We both knew what that might mean. "Listen," Frank continued, his voice dropping lower. "I've got my old truck running. The streets between our places are relatively clear. These things seem to be concentrating downtown. I'm thinking of making my way to you. Safety in numbers, right? I glanced at my supplies, mentally calculating. It's risky, Frank. Real risky. Everything's risky now, Jack. Betty's got her nurse training, and I've got enough firepower to start a small war. Plus, your place is better fortified than mine. We both know that. He had a point. Frank's house was on a busy street, more exposed, and having a nurse might prove invaluable if things got worse. Still, the thought of him traveling through infected streets. A loud crash upstairs interrupted my thoughts. Rita stirred on the camp bed, awakened by the noise. Okay, I decided. But we do this smart. When you come, drive slow. Engine noise seems to draw them. Park in my garage if you can make it. If not, abort. Don't take unnecessary chances. Roger that. We'll wait another hour until things quiet down a bit. I'll radio when we're close. After we disconnected, I filled Rita in on the situation. Her face lit up at the mention of Betty's nursing experience. It was the first hint of hope I'd seen since this started. The next hour was excruciating. The infected upstairs wandered aimlessly, their heavy footsteps and occasional crashes suggesting they were destroying everything they could reach. Driven by pure instinct to investigate any sound or movement, Jinx suddenly perked up, his ears twitching. A moment later I heard it too. A vehicle moving slowly down the street, engine barely above idle. The radio crackled. "We're a block away," Frank whispered. "But we've got company, about 6 of them following the truck." I moved to my weapon cache, selecting a rifle with a scope. "There's a small window in the garage that overlooks the street. I can provide cover. Make it count. We're coming in hot." I climbed the stairs to the garage entrance, my prosthetic leg protesting the quick movement. The garage had a separate entrance from the basement, fortified like everything else. Through the small window, I could see Frank's truck approaching, shadows lurching after it. The infected moved faster than the truck, gaining ground. I lined up my shot, remembering what we'd heard on the radio. Aim for the head. The rifle's sharp report echoed through the garage, the first infected dropping instantly. 2 more shots, 2 more down. Frank's truck reached the driveway. Betty was already opening her door before they fully stopped, a medical bag clutched in one hand. 3 more infected emerged from between houses, drawn by the noise. "Inside now!" I hissed through the partially opened door. Frank and Betty darted in as I fired again, dropping another infected. The garage door groaned closed behind them, agonizingly slow. The reunion was brief, just quick nods as we hurried back to the basement. Once the door was secured, Betty immediately hugged Rita, who seemed relieved to see another woman. Frank set down the bags he'd brought. More supplies, ammunition, medical equipment. "Murphy radioed just before we left," Frank said, catching his breath. "They've got about 15 people holed up in the bar now. That steel door is holding, and they've barricaded the windows. They're rationing the food and water. Tom's got his old radio working too," he continued. "Been picking up scattered transmissions. Military's trying to establish safe zones, but it's not going well. Whatever this is, it's spreading faster than they can contain it." Betty began organizing her medical supplies on a shelf. The hospital was overwhelmed when I left my shift. The bite victims. They turned so quickly. No warning, no chance to help them. Just sudden aggression, and then... She shuddered. Jinx approached Frank cautiously. He'd always been wary of visitors. To my surprise, he rubbed against Frank's leg before returning to his watchpost. "Your cat's smarter than most people," Frank observed. "Probably knew things were wrong before any of us." A particularly loud crash from upstairs made us all jump. The infected were still there, driven by their basic instincts to hunt and feed. "We need to think long-term," Frank said, spreading out a map he'd brought. "Murphy's got the bar secure, but they can't stay there forever. And we're going to run out of supplies eventually." I nodded, studying the map. "The military will either contain this or they won't. Either way, we need a better plan than just hiding in my basement." Betty spoke up from where she was organizing supplies. "The hospital's emergency protocols, they always emphasized the roof. Healthcare workers were supposed to gather there for helicopter evacuation in case of a major disaster. Maybe other buildings have similar plans?" "The college has a landing pad," Rita added. I saw it from my office window every day. They use it for their medical program. Frank traced routes on the map with his finger. If the military does establish a safe zone, these are the most likely evacuation points. We should plan accordingly. We spent the next hour plotting potential routes, marking danger zones where we'd seen concentrated infected activity. It felt good to be doing something productive, even if our plans might never be needed. The radio crackled again. Murphy checking in. The bar was still secure, though they'd had some close calls. They'd found more supplies in the cellar, and Tom had rigged up a better radio antenna. They were monitoring military frequencies, promising to relay any useful information. As the night deepened, we established a watch rotation. The infected upstairs moved sporadically, their restless wandering a constant reminder of the danger above. But none of us believed this was over. This was just the beginning, and we'd need every bit of preparation and luck to survive what came next. I took first watch, sitting near the radio with Jinx curled up beside me. The basement felt different now, not just a shelter but a command center. We had information, supplies, and most importantly, we weren't alone. A new transmission cut through the static, this one clearer than the others. The military was indeed establishing safe zones, but the message that followed chilled me to the bone. All major cities are compromised. Repeat, all major cities are compromised. Infection spreading at unprecedented rate. Civilian populations advised to shelter in place and await further instructions. I looked at my sleeping companions, at Jinx's alert form, at our carefully organized supplies. We'd survived the first wave, but something told me the real test was still to come. Dawn was approaching when the radio crackled with urgency. Murphy's voice came through, tense and hurried. "Jack, Frank, we've got trouble. A large group of them just broke through the bar's front windows. The steel door's holding, but we're trapped in the storage room." Frank and I exchanged glances. Betty and Rita stirred from their sleep spots, sensing the tension. "How many people do you have?" I asked, already knowing we couldn't just leave them there. 17 now. Some people made it in before things got bad. We've got water, some food, but... Murphy's voice trailed off as something crashed in the background. "They're getting in through the broken windows. There's too many of them." I studied our map of the area. The bar was 5 blocks away. In normal times, a short walk. Now, it might as well be miles. "We can't leave them," Frank said, voicing what I was thinking. "Most of those people helped build this community. Margaret from the bakery, old Joe from the hardware store." "The truck," Betty suggested. "We could get close enough to create a diversion, draw the infected away from the bar." I nodded slowly. "Murphy, can your people make it to vehicles if we clear a path?" "Yeah. Got 3 cars in the back lot, keys ready. Just need a window of opportunity." The plan came together quickly. Frank would drive, using the truck's horn to draw attention. Betty would stay in the basement with Rita, keeping our fallback position secure. I'd provide cover from the truck bed with my rifle. "Be careful," Betty whispered to Frank, hugging him tight. Jinx watched us intently as we prepared, his tail twitching with agitation. Before heading up, we checked our weapons one last time. We couldn't risk any infected following us back down. Moving up the basement stairs, we could hear them shuffling above. Frank took point with his shotgun while I covered our rear. The first infected came at us in the kitchen, 3 of them. Frank's shotgun boomed in the enclosed space, the sound almost physical. 2 went down. I took the 3rd with a clean headshot. We worked methodically through the house, room by room. 4 more in the living room, 2 in the hallway. Each shot precise, necessary. By the time we reached the garage, 7 bodies lay still on my floors. The house was clear. The morning air hit us as the garage door opened. The street looked different now, infected moving between houses drawn by the gunfire. Frank started the truck while I positioned myself in the bed, extra magazines within easy reach. The first block passed quickly. On the second, Frank hit the horn. The sound pierced the morning quiet, and immediately shapes emerged from doorways and alleys, drawn to the noise. As we approached Murphy's, I could see the extent of the problem. The bar's windows were shattered, and infected crowded the entrance, still trying to get at the people inside. Frank circled the block, horn blaring, and they turned toward us, driven by pure instinct toward the noise. "Murphy," I spoke into the radio. "Get ready. When I give the word, run for your vehicles." Frank made another pass, drawing more infected away from the bar. I picked off any that got too close to the truck, each shot carefully placed. We couldn't afford to waste ammunition. The infected were fully focused on us now, a mass of shambling bodies following the truck like a macabre parade. Frank kept a steady speed, just fast enough to stay ahead while keeping their attention. "Now, Murphy, go!" Through the rifle scope, I watched as people burst from the bar's back door, running for their vehicles. The infected near the back of the building turned at the sound, but I dropped them before they could reach the fleeing group. Engines roared to life, and 3 vehicles peeled out of the parking lot. Our plan had worked, but now we had a new problem. We'd drawn every infected in the area to us. "Frank, get us out of here." He hit the gas, but the horde was too thick. They pressed in from all sides, reaching for the truck. I fired until my rifle clicked empty, then switched to my handgun. The sheer mass of bodies made it impossible to see clearly. Frank swerved hard to avoid a particularly dense cluster. The truck's tires lost traction on something, probably one of the bodies, and we started to spin. Everything seemed to slow down as we careened toward the Anderson house next door to mine. The impact was explosive. The truck plowed through the front wall, taking out support beams and sending debris flying. I was thrown clear of the bed, my prosthetic leg catching on twisted metal as I flew. The artificial limb tore away completely as I landed hard on the Andersons' living room floor. Through the settling dust and ringing in my ears, I could see Frank slumped over the steering wheel. The truck had become a barrier between us and the street, but it wouldn't last. Already infected were squeezing through the gaps, their relentless moans getting closer. Frank wasn't moving. The growing horde pressed against the driver's side door, their bloody hands leaving smears on the glass. I had my pistol, but no rifle, no prosthetic, and an unconscious friend I needed to save. Dawn's light filtered through the ruined wall, illuminating the chaos in terrible clarity. The clock was ticking, and I could hear more infected coming. Time slowed to a crawl as I dragged myself toward Frank. The infected pressed against the truck's driver's side, their collective weight making the metal groan. Without my prosthetic, every movement was a challenge, but decades of adapting to life with one leg had taught me how to move when I needed to. The passenger door was clear for now, debris from the crash creating a temporary barrier. I pulled myself up using a broken chair, keeping my pistol ready. Frank was still unconscious, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The airbag had deployed, probably saving his life. "Frank," I hissed, reaching through the shattered passenger window to shake him. "Frank, wake up!" He stirred. Groaning. The sound drew more attention from outside. Hungry moans intensified as more infected pushed against the truck. The windshield was starting to crack under the pressure. "We need to move. Now." Frank's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then widening as reality hit him. "Jack? What? Where's your leg?" "Lost it in the crash. Doesn't matter. Can you move?" He tested his limbs, wincing. "Think so. Nothing feels broken." "Passenger door, quick and quiet. They haven't made it around yet." The door creaked as Frank pushed it open. I handed him my pistol while I kept hold of the chair for balance. Together, we moved deeper into the Anderson house, away from the growing horde at the front. Behind us, the windshield finally gave way with a sharp crack. The sound of infected pouring into the truck's cabin spurred us on faster. We found ourselves in the Andersons' kitchen. Frank was more steady now, though blood still ran down his face. Through the back window, I could see my house. So close, yet impossibly far given my condition. "Back door," I pointed. "But we need to be smart about this." Frank nodded, checking the pistol's magazine. 6 rounds left, just like that night in the Mekong Delta. When we were pinned down in that village, I smiled grimly, remembering. 6 rounds between us and a whole lot of trouble. The back door opened onto a small yard. The crash had drawn most of the infected to the front, but a few stragglers still wandered nearby. Frank raised the pistol, then lowered it. The noise would only draw more. We waited, watching their patterns. When a gap opened, we moved. Frank supported me as I hopped forward, my remaining leg trembling with effort. Each step felt like a mile. An infected turned toward us. Frank's shot took it down before it could alert others. 5 rounds left. Halfway across the yard, my leg gave out. I caught myself on Frank's shoulder, but the movement was too sudden, too loud. Heads turned in our direction. Another shot from Frank, 4 rounds. We reached the back fence. Under normal circumstances, I could have managed it one-legged, but exhaustion was setting in, my arms shaking from the strain of moving without my prosthetic. 2 more quick shots dropped infected closing in. 2 rounds left. Frank fired again, 1 round left. The fence began to creak as more infected pressed against it. Frank took aim at the closest threat, but before he could fire, rapid gunfire erupted from behind us. Infected dropped in quick succession. The shots precise and controlled. "You boys look like you could use some cover fire," Bill's voice. He was moving toward us from the direction of my house, his M16 steady in his hands, just like in the old days. "Figured you two would need saving again," he called out, dropping 3 more infected. "Just like that time outside Saigon," Frank laughed, relief evident in his voice. "Took your sweet time getting here." "Had to make a dramatic entrance," Bill replied, moving closer. "You remember how it was, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." Together we made our way to my back door. Bill's covering fire, keeping the infected at bay. The fence collapsed behind us, but Bill's steady stream of fire created the window we needed. The door swung open, and we practically fell inside. Bill entered last, slamming it shut just as the horde reached us. Betty and Rita were there immediately, helping us to the basement door. As we descended, I could hear the infected pounding on the walls outside, but we'd made it, all of us. "Thought I lost you guys when the phones went down," Bill said as Betty tended to Frank's head wound. "Made my way here as soon as I could. Figured if anyone had a proper bunker set up, it'd be Jack." "Murphy radioed while you were gone," Betty said. "They made it to the high school. It's defendable, they say. Room for more." I looked at my companions. Frank getting patched up, Bill cleaning his rifle with practiced ease, Rita monitoring the radio, Betty focused on her work. Jinx padded over and settled beside me, purring softly. "We'll need to move eventually," I said. "But not today. Today we rest. Tomorrow." Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The infected weren't going anywhere, and we couldn't hide forever. But we'd survived the first wave together. 3 old soldiers and 2 civilians, holding out against impossible odds. Just like before. Outside, the sun climbed higher, illuminating a changed world. The morning brought no relief, no rescue, no answers, just the constant reminder that survival wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes it was about knowing who you could count on when everything went to hell. I looked at my missing prosthetic leg and thought about adaptation. We'd all need to adapt to this new world, but that's what we did best. We adapted, we survived, we carried on. Together. The radio crackled with another military broadcast, but this time we knew better than to wait for rescue. In this new world, we could only count on ourselves and each other. And sometimes that's more than enough.